AutoLine After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.
Hey, welcome everybody to Autoline After Hours, and especially to you, Gary.
Oh, thank you, John. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
In this Michigan winter that we're finally having?
This is a real winter, let me tell you what.
You're
nodding your head in agreement, right?
We're going to have a hot show.
Well, yeah, that's right. So we should let everybody know our special guest today is Olivier Boinet. He's the Director of Advanced Customer Interface at Forvia, which really doesn't tell the audience anything. He's really an expert in interior design, and we're going to be getting into that. And we've also got Dave Zoya joining us as well. So, Dave, great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Pleasure to be here.
Excellent. So, Gary, you always have a bunch of questions all lined up. I sort of go off the top of my head. Why don't we start from a more structured standpoint with you?
Okay, so Olivier, one of the things that we promised that we would talk to you about, and we'll start talking about this right from the get-go, and then we'll move on from there to the other things that John will want to get to. You guys developed screen technology called AirVision.
Correct, yes.
And this is, my understanding, is to eliminate much of the screen confusion that exists when we're looking at cars. And nowadays it seems, and Dave and I have driven a ton of cars of late, looking at interiors, and screens are everywhere. And not to mention the lighting that is being used as trim now. I mean, it's just like you're in some sort of a carnival when you sit down in a vehicle. You guys are addressing that. Tell us about it.
We're addressing that. In fact, the concept is also to reduce the quantity of information that is blasted at you all the time. I always feel like, as an HMI designers, you have a canvas, and this canvas is now multiple screens, and you feel like you have to put information everywhere. As a consumer, as a driver, sometimes you have way too much information coming at you. So the thing we do with AirVision is we work through a reflection type system, which means the picture framing that you get of what we call postcarding effect of having a screen inside a black surface doesn't exist anymore. You can have 1 screen, 2 screens, 5 screens, and not see a screen, but see information. And this information seems to be floating in space in front of you. So it has a real magical aspect to it. And because of that, you can make information come when you need it, and only the information that you need at that moment. So it gives you a less distracted driving system, but also a more precise system. And the quality of the image is really interesting.
But I mean, is there a classic screen, or are you just using a surface that you're projecting on?
We're not projecting. It's literally a reflection. So you still have screens, but you don't. The dimension of the screen is not as important, in the sense that if you have a 9-inch screen, well, you can see a 9-inch block, right? Now, if I have a 9-inch screen in the system, you don't see the edge of the screen, so you see just the information. That allows you to have maybe more classic screens and have just as good of a quality. Particularly when you start using a local dimming, you can really, really get some beautiful imagery, because the decor, what we call the decor, is what's behind, is always there. So you have this beautiful piece of fabric, for example, that is there, and the image is floating in front of it, in the image of just your cluster, for example, or your navigation. You have to experience it. It's true that it's...
I've seen it, and I wouldn't even describe it as a screen, because when you say screen, we all think of the screens that we're all used to. I would call it more of a display area.
Exactly.
And so instead of, these rectangular screens attached to the instrument panel, it's a display area that sort of floats behind the instrument panel.
Correct.
I guess is the way I would describe it. Mm-hmm. But you must love the idea, as a designer,
yes,
Olivier, you must love the idea of getting rid of these screens.
It has become almost, it has, I think it's been a race to the number of screen and the size of screen, to a point where I feel like the consumer are getting screen fatigue. We're up to doing one of those doesn't exist anymore. They had a 52-inch screen. 52-inch is bigger than my TV. And do I need that to drive a car? Clearly not, right? So I feel like we're going to move toward a much calmer interior, and that's a solution that can be used for that.
But the other thing from a design standpoint is these screens just look like an afterthought that have been added to the instrument panel up to now. And it's, to me, I knew the industry had to get through this. It's just an inelegant design solution. And so I love the fact that you guys are coming up with a whole another idea on this. Even the screens that have been embedded into the console or the instrument panel look like screens that have been embedded, maybe a little bit better instead of just stuck on.
Right.
But you guys are shattering that whole paradigm with this new approach.
Yes, that is a goal. And bring something to the designers that they can design things again. Because it feels like, when you have a screen, you have a screen. The best you can do is cover it with a black lens and maybe make it a little less square, but it's still always, the same language. And it becomes difficult to get a differentiation from interior to interior when you start looking at, particularly in Chinese car, which have screens everywhere. They all end up looking the same. To me, there's not the design freedom of creating something interesting to look at because of so many screens.
This then requires that the IP itself be designed differently than it is
Absolutely.
designed now.
Yes.
So tell us what the changes would be.
Well, I think some of the big changes is mostly on the integration. So, that's one of the advantages we have at Forvia is we have multiple business group. So we have an electronic business group, plus Foresight Clarion Electronic, which does screens. And we have the interior system group that does instrument panel. And we have even software people in Toronto that are doing some fantastic software based around the eye, so that it's not just programming, it's programming for the human eye so that we can do better imagery. And all those working together give us the capacity to do some intelligent integration, which I can't give you too much detail on that at the moment because we're still working on it. But yes.
So would you deliver an entire IP to the assembly line? Is that
We
the
do.
goal?
We do. Currently, we do. We do currently deliver, I don't know, close to 2 million, I believe, a year, IP instrument panel for, all kinds of customers. And we do that all over the world.
How do you control? I mean, you're obviously looking at eye gaze and things like that, but
So
is there
that is
also
one-
another way to control what's going on?
So today you can control it through an MMI, so a rotary, like you control a lot of German cars. You can't touch it because it's too far from you, and it's not really a touch screen because it's not really a screen. But you can control it with a secondary screen. You can control it by voice as well. And the one I prefer that we are currently developing is Gaze and Select, where since we've had to implement cameras to watch a driver, make sure he's being safe. It's new European legislation. So through that, we can track the eyes, and by tracking the eyes, we can see where he's looking, and we can then, through a button or a voice, select an icon to activate something.
So you could look at something on this display,
right, which is not even there because it's a reflection, right?
and then it would detect that, and let's say it was a navigation map, that it would blow the map up so then the guy could see that.
Yes. So the Gaze and Select, the degree of precision is what we're working on. It works. What we're trying to do is define that area to a much smaller space. So currently, things we do is like we look at an icon. The icon gets bigger because you're looking at it, and then you push a button to select it, and it opens a menu, for example. Those kind of things are what we do right now. The spacing we have between the icons is currently a certain distance, and we're trying to shrink that distance so that we can correctly identify things that are close to each other. But it's we've been in testing with consumer as well to see the appetite of people and how quickly they understand and use it. It has to be very precise for it to be adopted. So that's what we're working on right now.
But you need the button, so it isn't like an oh
You
shit
need
moment
you
when
need-
you look at something and you're
you
like,
need-
oh, I didn't
you
mean
need
to look at that.
a confirmation. You know, I mean, it's kind of if you think of the system that people talk through when they can't talk, and it's looking at the eyes, and they're you know, those things have been around for a while, and being able to do it by blinking would be a solution, but everybody blinks, and some people blink more than others. So
Mhm.
you know, having a physical confirmation, I think, is a good way of making it safe in a mobile vehicle as
Right.
well. Let's not forget that we are also doing something as driving. Or,
Well, John, you're mentioning screens and how they've had this effect on interior design. What was it, the Ford Expedition that had the screens that were like behind?
Yeah, it was behind sort of along the windshield more, right?
And then BMW's got that where they're doing a reflection on the fret that's around the glass. Are you seeing designers coming up with things like you guys have developed? I mean, like this is becoming a new phenomenon.
I feel that that's things we've been showing in, having smaller screens that are closer to the windshield, so that they're more in the direction of the car movement, and so your focal is not has to change so much from a screen here to I think that's definitely something that's coming more and more. We've been showing it for maybe 5 years. I think the first time, 4 or 5 years, and I feel like we tend, I don't know, I'm going to say that properly, but we tend to come up with trends within Ford that we show in our show car, and then we see them a few years later in the market pretty regularly. And not always made by us, unfortunately.
Yeah, somebody stole your idea.
I wouldn't say we. I feel like the car industry has a mind that is very everywhere at the same time. I always feel like we think of something and then Audi does it, and it's like, oh yeah, we had the same idea. It's not. We didn't even show it to them. They the round air vent with a number giving you the temperature on a little screen. We did that at the LA Auto Show, and it was in their cars the next year, and I know they didn't see it. It was just, I think designers have the same influences, right? We look at the same thing, and
You're trying to solve the same problems.
we try and solve the same problem. We have the same influences. So I believe that there's not, one person that invents everything. I think it gets invented by pieces by multiple people at the same time, and then sometimes they get put together in a really intelligent and nice ways. But yeah, I don't feel like designers are almighty for that. It's just everybody's got pieces of it. It's just reading a magazine, watching a movie, internet, all those things. They all influence us.
So do heads-up displays go away, you think, in the future with this kind of?
The one thing that heads-up is great at is giving you information that's floating in space. The problem is the space that's in front of it is not controllable, right? So if it's really bright out, you can't see it. If it's really dark, you won't turn it on because it's too bright. It is great because where it's projecting the information, it's just difficult to control because of the environment. So what we're doing with our vision is reversing the system so that we control the environment and you always have a good vision of it. But in the end, it's giving information when you need it, where you need it, in a much more elegant way, and that's what we're trying to do.
I like what you talked about, Olivier, reducing the information overload for drivers, because it's definitely there. There's all kinds of distraction, not just with the phones.
Right.
How do you, where do you see that going? Because I've seen all kinds of future thinking from mainly automotive suppliers as to where things could go, where They're using virtual reality to identify whether it's a person or a dog, walking along the sidewalk, maybe going in front of them. And all of it is really cool from a technology standpoint. But all I can think of, if all these things start popping up on my screen, identifying what's out there, it's going to be more information overload.
Yeah, that. There's an ADAS aspect of it, so the safety, this I think is a good thing, but how much of that information needs to be given all the time is more. I feel like we should be able to control the quantity of information we give in function of the importance of the information we're giving. The fact that the car can see every pedestrian, every bicycle, everything all the time, it's great for the car to do that, but only show it to me when I need to know that this bicycle I might eat because I missed it. That the importance of information should be hierarchically, I don't even know if that's a real word.
Yes. Yes.
Put in front of you at the right moment.
Mm-hmm.
We were working with a company that was working on getting cars driving by themselves, and that was reversed because now you were a passenger in a car, and the screen was giving you a lot of information to make you feel safer that the car was actually seeing everything that you were seeing and was aware of it. And that was a completely opposite effect, where you wanted that over information because the person spent all the time looking at the screen, not even looking outside because of all the information that was happening in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really interesting experience. And we did some tests on tracks with little robots crossing the road and things. That was pretty interesting.
So Olivier, to what extent do you think that vehicle manufacturers look at the abundance of screens as being something that is valuable, sets them apart, makes it, it's a bigger screen, it's a more expensive vehicle, obviously. And I mean, it's sort of like when wood was used in interiors for a long time because that meant luxury, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
I hope wood comes back because I like the warm aspect of wood in the vehicle, but especially modern wood.
But do you see what I'm saying? That it would be very difficult for people to suddenly pull back and say we have a discrete design in terms of our interface versus you get into what was an Escalade IQ that has a pillar to A pillar screen,
right.
That.
I feel that we are reaching the point where the screens are going to go back down in size and quantity. We reach a max. I feel like we reach a maximum. Pillar to pillar, it's in the Ford, it's in the Cadillac, or the Lincoln, it's in a lot of Chinese car now too. It's in the Mercedes. The giant piece of glass, it's not really fun to look at. I feel like that as a designer, I get it. I understand why it's there. I even know why we got there. Now we got there. Now I think it's time to back up from that a little bit and bring interesting design back into and I think you still need the information. So we're still going to have information given to us. Although, I used to drive a Renault 5 and there was nothing in there, right? And I drove just fine. But we also need to look at I feel like there's also a massive problem in our industry today is the affordability of vehicle. We've just got to a point where there's so much money in the cars that most people can't afford new cars anymore.
Right.
I look at my children, none of them can afford a new car, and they all have a job, and they all, it's gotten to a point where it's difficult to find something that's even affordable at all. So I feel like, that excess of technology costs money. Screens are not cheap. And the more screen, the more money, and the more electronics behind it, and the more, and the more, and the more. And I feel like the prices of vehicle proportionally to what they provide has gotten out of hand completely. And I think that's something that needs to evolve, and that simplification will bring cheaper prices for sure.
Olivia, we've talked a lot about screens, display
Yep.
information, and all that, but I'm sure you're thinking more about the entire interior.
Yeah.
What kind of other things do you think that we're going to see? Trends?
Seat comfort is really getting key because we spend more and more time in our cars. So how you get to comfortable interiors, it's not necessarily by adding more feature, right? It's good design, it's understanding the body posture. Now we move in the seat. I feel that that's something that's going to grow, and the sustainability is another point. I feel like that's something we don't talk a lot about in the U.S. It's more European thing, but it is some of our customers have targets for the amount of sustainability, meaning recyclable material, how to evolve an interior. Like we're working with a European OEM on how we can refurbish a car. Basically a factory where you bring your car at one end, you drop the keys, and you go at the end, and you get your car back, and it's been modernized and it's been upgraded throughout the entire system. And that's really interesting to me, the idea of modularity, meaning how to disassemble and reassemble a car. A car seat typically after 5 years, the bolster on the exterior of the car is beat up because you go in and out every day, and the driver sees usually worse than the passenger. What if you can remove and replace that, and only that, not the whole seat? There are ideas of upgradability that I think are interesting for an interior.
No, this is very interesting what you're talking about, and I want to say, Sean, you'll remember, is it Stellantis or Renault are doing refurbished parts that they're selling? Both of them. Yeah. And so, but I like this idea of you bring your car to a factory, they run it down the line, and you have an upgraded car at the end.
So is it like the interior of an airplane? I mean, the airframes last a long time, but the interiors get upgraded.
They get upgraded and renewed regularly. Yeah, absolutely. That's the concept that we're toying with right now. And not just us. I mean, Renault does it as well. Stellantis. It's very European today, but I think it's interesting to see it grow, because we have limited resources on our planet, right? And we can't just keep on bearing it after we're done with it, because we only need it at some point. And nothing is infinite. So it's I feel like the automotive industry uses a lot of raw materials. Maybe we should use them longer, better.
Well, this is an interesting idea, because this gets to the heart of affordability. If you can have a car that's 4 or 5 years old but has been upgraded again, this is better than certified pre-owned. It's taken that up another notch. That's an intriguing business model.
It's clearly not the current business model of make and sell all the time, but I feel like as the markets are maturing, there's got to be some evolution on how we do business. Yeah.
And then I got to believe that with autonomy, you're able to completely rethink what you might be able to do with the interior of a car.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that we've been toying with seats that turns, the idea of that that one image that we've all seen with the whole families in this Studebaker, I think it was, and with a glass roof, and they're all around the table like playing cards or something. That image, it still fascinates us as designer for interior, because there's a modularity to that idea that it's. You move your chairs around, you move the people around the interiors, and you do other things, not just sit on the row waiting to get there, right? The journey becomes an interesting part of the travel, not just where you are and where you want to be, but how you get there and what happened in between.
But you guys have to deal with a lot of safety regulations in terms of,
Absolutely.
Yes. That's probably what is keeping, because it always occurs to me that seat designers always have these wonderful looking seats that we see at shows, and we never see them in production vehicles. They all...
Absolutely, yes.
And I'm sure that goes back to the thing of, like, you need that thing bolted down.
Yep. The safety aspect of a seat is incredible. In a crash situation, the amount of a force that you impact on the seat that has to go to the floor of the car and those 4 little bolts, basically. So it's there's a lot of engineering behind it. However, there's capabilities of doing things a little different, and it's not always explored because it's easier to do something standard. Tooling a seat frame is many millions of dollars. So the OEs have figured that out a long time ago, and they use the same frame for multiple vehicles and for multiple generations. I remember many years ago wanting to add an armrest that was actually part of the seat, and to make that one hole to put the armrest fixing on, that was $1 million tool change. So we never did it. So yeah, I feel like as generation change, that's when you can implement something new and different. But like between one model year and the following one, there's not a lot of change. It takes, usually the frame can last for 10 years, no question.
Wow. Olivia, are your customers, the automakers, bringing companies like Forvia in earlier in programs? I saw Ralph Gilles, the head of design for Stellantis, a few months ago, and he was saying he wanted suppliers in the studio at the sketch stage, because if you can design ideas in at the very beginning, there's no extra cost. Whereas if the design's done and they see like you say, you want to add a hole for an armrest, it's $1 million. Right. My question: are they bringing you in earlier than they did before?
Yes, they are. And you're talking about Ralph. He's definitely one of the spearhead of that idea. Him and quite a few other that are wanting us to look at, because my job as a designer is not to create for them. My job is to make sure that their design gets into a production. So a lot of time I have more technical knowledge of how it's done than they do, and I can spot things that are not feasible much quicker. But being a designer, I can talk with them in the design sense and explain why and what we could do if we can do that. That would bring the same result. They can't do that with engineers. Engineers says, no, it's not feasible, and then walk away. So what do I do with that information, right? So we are getting involved as industrial designer, not stylist, a lot earlier with the OEs than we used to. Especially there was a period long time ago where we were very involved with the design team very early on. We were working with concept car at the time. I worked on several concept car with the design studios to get to something that was feasible quickly. And then there was this period where everything went to build to print, and they didn't want to talk to us at all anymore. We'd get things thrown over the wall, look at them, tell them it doesn't work, make some proposal, and that slows the system down a lot. If we can get to a feasible design when we're sketching together, that would be in production much, much quicker.
Yeah.
And I feel that that's one of the advantages the Asian OEM, especially the Chinese OEM, have had on the rest of the world, because they are involving us much, much earlier.
Yeah, very interesting. Look, with that, we're going to have to wrap up this part of the show. But Olivia, very interesting having you come on and talk all about where interior design's going. I want to thank you for being here.
I appreciate being here. Thank you very much.
Good deal. We're going to be back in a minute. We're going to be talking about more of the news that has gone on all week long in this crazy automotive industry. But first, a shout out to our great sponsor, Bridgestone.
Making a life full of memories, one road trip at a time. That's what really matters. Bridgestone Weather Peak tires with a 70,000-mile limited warranty.
All right, we're back. We're going to be talking news of what's gone on in the week. And Gary, you always got a list of things to go through.
Well, I think that since it's the closest in time, we should talk about the Tesla earnings.
Oh, wow. That was fascinating, I thought. I don't know if you've been following that too, Gary.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
So sales down, revenue down, operating profits down, net profits down. The stock goes up because Elon is essentially, in my view, kind of walking away from the retail automotive business, and he's going to put all his chips on AI, humanoid robots, robo-taxis, and computer chips.
Yeah, it was very interesting that, during the earnings call yesterday and the questions, and the questions are always very interesting because the analysts are asking questions by and large, and there was virtually no discussion of automobiles. Okay, they announced yesterday that they're winding down the Model S, they're winding down the Model X.
They're scrapping them. I mean,
buy them now because they're going to be gone.
They're going to be gone in the next quarter, so they're gone in a couple of months.
Now we all know that they're old in the tooth, and they should have probably gone away before now. And in traditional auto industry, that that would be just a normal.
We don't make them go. You refresh them. You
put some money into it. Yeah.
But nobody talked about that. Nobody asked questions about that. I mean, there were questions about the cyber cab, but not cars. I mean,
what are the analysts interested in? They're interested in where's the stock price going. And it's pretty clear the stock price is not being driven by automotive retail. And I mentioned automotive retail because, clearly they're still going to make the cyber semi.
Mentioned.
Right. And the cyber cab. So that's why I'm saying retail automotive. That seems to have fallen off Elon's
the story on electric vehicles isn't very compelling right now, right? I mean, so to sell Tesla stock basically based on what's going on in the electric vehicle market is a tough sell, I think.
Yeah, no, it totally is. And when your sales are going down, your revenue and your profits are going down. I mean, if this was a quote unquote normal car company, their stock would tank. Well, maybe not, because GM also reported drops in profits, and its stock did fairly well.
Well, GM's net income for 2025 went down 55% from 2024. Much of that was attributed to the tariffs that they had to eat.
Oh, and their EV write-off.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, if you...
Well, to your point, EV write-off.
Right.
Yeah.
So, the Tesla story is fascinating. Musk says they're going to spend $20 billion in capital expenditures this year alone. I mean, just to put that in perspective, that's like twice what General Motors would normally spend. And Tesla is a much smaller company than GM. So, I mean, he's going to go crazy, getting rid of the X and the S and converting that manufacturing space for humanoid robots. He wants to build his own chips. We all know that fab plants are humongously expensive, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I was interested at CES, there was a lot of talk about robotics, and a lot of auto companies or people in the auto ecosphere are getting into robotics and humanoids. So you got all the chip guys, right, are acquiring robotics companies or launching divisions where they're very focused. Even traditional suppliers like Schaeffler talked about it recently, about how they're going to sell sensors and things into the robotics world. So everybody's jumping into that field, but it sounds to me like he's a little over optimistic on the timeline, right?
What a surprise! Elon being optimistic about a timeline,
so,
right?
So I think there's that. Because the more realistic chatter around CES was it's a difficult proposition, and there's, particularly with humanoids and getting them even into factory settings, there's a whole cultural aspect to this, in terms of companies wanting to invest in that, getting workers, that you have the labor issues, all that kind of stuff. So I think he's way over optimistic about using that capacity to start pumping out humanoid robots.
Yeah, no, he is. But, Elon's all about painting this great vision of the future that people buy into, and that drives the stock price. So when you ask, why didn't anybody talk about, the normal automotive operations? No, he's talking about building 1 million humanoids a year. He's talking about 5 million to 10 million cyber cabs a year. And building their own chips, designing their own chips, and where they're going with AI, and Tesla and SpaceX both are going to invest in XAI, and that's what the analysts are. That's music to their ears.
So if you look at the Optimus 3, which they all proclaimed was the best thing ever and ever will be, world without end, and it occurred to me, I wonder how these things are going to be serviced and repaired, because mechanical devices break, right? And so I was unable to find any indication that that's being addressed by Tesla. And it reminds me of when we had Henry Payne on, who owned his Model 3, and he had a problem with it, and he had to go from Detroit to Cleveland to get it fixed. Okay, so you've got your Optimus 3 that's in your house that suddenly is freaking out. Who's going to fix it?
Well, look, any assembly plant today has all kinds of robots in there, mainly welding and painting. They've got to be serviced. They've got to be repaired.
Right, but they're not walking around your house, and this is what he's talking about these being used for. I mean, you don't use 1 million robots. I mean, he's got 6 plants. He ain't going to be using 1 million robots in 6 factories.
Right. That's part of the problem is the adoption, even in factory settings, is a few units or things like that. There's not like a mass volume that somebody usually commits to. And getting it into your house, I mean, people are talking about the whole safety aspect of that. Are you going to trust a robot around your kids at this point? So, I think that's a question. But the fixing them, I think they want to train the robots to fix the robots ultimately. Somebody had a demonstration where they were swapping out the robot's battery at the end of the day, kind of thing. So, they can train them to be self-sufficient.
Service robot takes off its arm, sticks it on the broken robot.
Yeah, look, no, you're right. It was Hyundai with Boston Dynamics robot showed a robot on the line. Its stomach, so to speak, is a battery. It goes over to a shelf. It pulls its battery out of its stomach, snaps another one into place, and goes back to work.
Yeah,
so
Westworld.
Why not have that kind of approach for servicing them or repairing them?
But I'm skeptical. Okay. So you mentioned Hyundai. Hyundai's operating profit, which was reported, fell 19.5% from 2024.
Well, I know both Hyundai and Kia took tariff hits,
and that was because of tariffs.
$5 billion combined.
Yeah, it was $3 billion for Hyundai alone in terms of the tariff impact that they had on that, and that was talking about the 15% tariff. Not the 25% tariff that President Trump said on Monday that he was going to be applying to South Korea because the South Korean legislature hasn't approved the deal fast enough.
Well, we'll see if that happens. You know how Trump operates. He's always trying to get the deals done, and with more threats. I don't think it's going to happen. The 25% tariff, that is. We'll see. I mean, it could, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Toyota did well. It had record sales of 10.5 million, which puts it well established.
I thought it was more. I thought it was 11 million something.
If you include Daihatsu and Hino.
Oh yeah, if you include Daihatsu and Hino, which Toyota usually does, because they're part of the Toyota
Well, this is
group.
Toyota Lexus, so just
Toyota
the cars,
Lexus.
the passenger vehicles, and so they. But I mean, I've read that they have been absorbing the tariff costs, and so they're saying like, okay, consumer, we won't pass it on to you yet.
I got to work on this. I've been talking about doing it. Toyota used to make boatloads of money in the U.S. market, and then about 5 years ago, it started reporting losses and has continued to. And so I got to dig into that. There's something funny going on there.
Funny how, John?
Funny how, because Nissan and Honda make more profit in the United States than they do anywhere else in the world. Toyota sells more vehicles than they do at a higher price point than they do and loses money. What is going on?
There's more stuff in their cars.
Yeah,
perhaps more screens.
I don't want to tip
expensive.
my hand as to what I think is really going on, because I got to dig into the numbers first.
All right.
But there's some funny business going on there.
So, speaking of funny business, there was the Canada-China agreement, wherein I want to get this. Canada will allow up to 49,000 Chinese-built electric vehicles per year into the Canadian market. Tariffs on Chinese EVs will drop from 100%, which they put on after Biden put the 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs, down to 6.1%, which is the standard most favored nation rate. And the 50% of all Chinese EVs imported under the 49,000 unit annual quota must be priced at $35,000 or below by 2030. What do you make of this, John?
Well, look, I've been talking about this since last year. Canada
It
has
was only
been,
like 4 weeks ago. So.
well, I know, but this goes back to a conversation I had with the Consul General of Canada based in Detroit, and that they didn't want to do it, but if the Trump administration forced their hand, they would play the China card, i.e., if Trump is going to trash the Canadian auto industry, which he's effectively doing, GM and Stellantis have already pulled all kinds of production out of Canada. So the Canadians were like, look, if the Trump administration is going to destroy our auto industry, we're going to turn to other alternatives. Most notably being, we'll let the Chinese come into our market. And now the question is this really going to happen? The USMCA free trade agreement is up for renegotiation this summer. That gives the Canadians a hell of a bargaining chip. And so let's see if they go through with this or if it's just a bargaining chip.
I think it's a done deal. I mean, because it's the Canadians want to sell their agricultural products. That's part of the thing that they need to, to move this stuff to China.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this auto part is just one small aspect of a larger larger deal.
I hear what you're saying. I'm not fully convinced it's going to happen yet.
I think it was a smart play, though, because, I mean, if you look at how auto industries get developed, companies come in, they develop a market, and then they invest. Kind of the Trump notion that the Chinese are going to come here, lay out a few $1 billion to set up assembly and all that kind of stuff before they have a market, I think is wrong. And I think, the Canadians are starting to see the potential for the Chinese to come in and invest in Canada, I think. And the U.S. is going to be squeezed in the middle where China's in Mexico, they'll be in Canada.
Right.
And the U.S. industry is losing out on that Canadian and Mexican market. Right?
Trump said he'd welcome Chinese automakers to come into the U.S.
You got to let them in first, I think. I mean, that's the way it's always worked, right? Volkswagen was here, then they built a plant. And the Japanese, they got some market, and then they built plants. And Chinese aren't just going to come in here without a base.
Julia said they'll build cars in the Volvo plant in South Carolina. So that's minimal investment for them to come in here.
Given the fact that they own Volvo,
right.
So it's like they're building it in their plant.
That's right. But
they already have the
You're right.
investment,
Usually you have to establish some kind of market, and then once you get enough volume, then you can start building. But they already got a plant, Geely does. So
Mary Barra called this move by the Canadian government a slippery slope. And I was reading today, and I highly recommend, and I'm going to destroy her last name, but our friend Jackie Charniga of the Detroit Free Press wrote an absolutely amazing story that's in today's paper, and I think USA Today also picks it up for those who are not in the Detroit area, about the CAMI plant in Ingersoll, Ontario. How Ingersoll, Ontario is basically, the town exists because of that plant. And that's where they were making Equinoxes. But then General Motors says, let's make them in Mexico. So they took the Equinoxes out of the plant and the GMC trains out of the plant. So then they were like, we're going to build the BrightDrop vehicles. This is going to revolutionize last mile delivery. This is going to be the best thing ever. Rivian's got the Amazon van. We got the BrightDrop. Okay. And how last fall they basically said, we're done. And now the plant is just being shut. And I'm thinking to myself, so what is it that General Motors is doing for Canada that this slippery slope is existing because the Canadian government's saying, we're hoping Chinese will come and invest some money in our auto industry.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what Mary Barra means by a slippery slope, but things are changing fast. That's for sure. And you know, Canada is a market of less than 2 million vehicles a year. It manufactures about 1.5 million, so the rest, being imports, essentially, although it exports most of what it produces, mainly to the U.S. But yeah, how much does General Motors really need Canada? I mean, it doesn't want to walk away from that investment, but if the Trump administration is going to rig the market so that it doesn't make any sense to be in Canada, GM will pull the plug on Canada.
So why did that bright drop van fail?
Well, look, what electric vans have caught on. Ford's electric Transit,
E-Transit,
hasn't sold much of anything. Rivian has sold, I think Amazon claims they've got 25,000 of its electric vans in operation right now. If not for the Amazon orders, where would the Rivian van be? And so you ask me why is bright drop? Look, the numbers just don't compute.
But didn't we hear when Bright Drop was announced that FedEx is going to buy X many and this company is going to buy that many, and this is the and this is the perfect use of an EV because there are deterministic routes, and we know what the routes are, and they go back to the depot at night and they get recharged, and this makes so much sense. What happened to that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Gary. I mean, because you're right. For a fleet owner that has, a normal delivery route is about 80 miles for most Amazon trucks. It's perfect. It's perfect to have them electric. And then they go back to their marshaling yard and they charge up overnight, and the drivers come back in the next day and everything's full range again. So I talked to a driver, loves driving the thing, and it much prefers it over the ICE-powered vans. But why have not other fleets picked up on this?
I just got to believe it's initial cost. That fleets, your cost of ownership, if you buy the EV, probably all works out and to your benefit. But it's making that initial investment where you can buy 10 vehicles that are ICEs and save, $100,000 or whatever.
Right. Plus, I think you're absolutely right on that. It's also, you've got mechanics who are trained on the old ICE vehicles.
Right.
You've got all the parts, you got all the tools, and now you've got to get all new everything for the electric vehicles. So it's the purchase price, it's the charging infrastructure, but it's also who's going to work on these things. And why don't we, I'm thinking as a fleet manager, it's like, wow, that's a lot of change. I'm just going to go out and buy some more Econoline vans.
Yeah, it's changing the mindset. It's the same thing innovation runs into everywhere, right? It's just changing that culture and that mindset.
But John, that point about the fleet manager having to think about the repair and the difficulty in finding people who are able to do that, doesn't that argue that consumer EV purchases are going to run into that at some point in time, where there's a realization of I need my car fixed, but I call the dealer and he's only got one guy who works on EVs and he's got 12 cars ahead of mine,
right?
Versus if I have an ICE vehicle, you can go to a mechanic down the street and he can fix it.
Yeah, let's see what happens, because up to now everybody's been buying EVs brand new, and so they're under warranty. In the consumer's mind, it's going to be taken care of if there's a problem. But now we're seeing significant numbers of EVs coming off lease. And in fact, we reported in Autoline Daily this week, there was a study from the University of Michigan that showed 3-year-old EVs have the lowest cost of ownership. And in fact, car for car, compared to an ICE vehicle, you can save over the life of the vehicle up to $13,000 because of that. But the key is because it's used, and they've taken the main depreciation hit. And that's true of any kind of vehicle. Whoever buys it secondhand, it was the first owner that took the depreciation hit. But now we're going to see all kinds of EVs coming into the used car lots at dealers because people are going to trade them in or it's going to come off lease. The dealer is either going to send it to auction or they're going to try to sell it on their lot. And we're going to see a lot more used EVs being bought. And then we're going to run into the issue that you're talking about here, Gary. Who's going to service them? Who's going to repair them?
It's going to be tough. All right, so I got one more, another trade agreement. This is between the EU and India. And India will cut tariffs on imported European cars from 110% down to 40% initially, and eventually to 10% once this is fully implemented. It is supposed to be implemented by the end of the year.
End of the year, end of the decade. I thought it was the end of the decade when it dropped to 10%.
Well, my reading of it is that it will be like the ink will be dried.
The 40% this year, right? And but you're right. Look,
it will allow 250,000 EU-made vehicles to enter at the 10% tariff, which is 6 times larger than any other previous Indian trade deal, which was 37,000 with vehicles from the UK.
Look, it's significant. I mean, India's got a population greater than China's. It's not a big market. I mean, compared to China, I think India sells 4.5 million vehicles a year. It's actually the 3rd largest market by country in the world. That really surprised. It's China, the United States, and then India. And now I'm talking by country. Obviously, Europe is much bigger but by country, no, India is. And it's the last great growth market potentially left in the world. India and Africa are the last places on earth where there's huge populations. India is 1.4 billion in population. Africa is 1 billion, where car ownership is very, very low. You look at around the rest of the world, it's saturated. There's no growth, not even China. So Renault jumped right on that deal and said, we're going into India in a big way.
So I wonder, okay, the European car makers are obviously affected by the tariffs that have been established in the United States. Will sales in India offset that?
Offset what?
Well, okay, if I'm I'm BMW, suddenly it's more expensive for me to sell a vehicle in the United States than it had been. Now that there's this deal with India, I'll sell to India and I will make up from what I'm losing in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, but you got to be realistic. I mean, it's not like the Indian market is all of a sudden going to explode in volume, but it will grow. And so you may not, as a BMW, per your example, be able to offset tariff losses in the United States this year. By the end of the decade, maybe the Indian market is pretty significant for you.
So maybe it's the Volkswagen brand, not BMW.
Yeah, maybe.
May make it simpler. But one of the interesting things is that they're going to have the EU is the supply base that they're buying from other countries. Now India becomes a much more appealing place for them to do their business for things like wiring harnesses, forgings, castings, etc. That there's like zero tariff that they're going to be having. So it will the ZFs and other suppliers of the world, I think, are going to be rushing there faster than the OEMs are.
Well, right. I mean, maybe there's more geopolitical stability sourcing out of India than there is in China. But all those suppliers have got huge investments in China that I'm sure they don't want to walk away from. But now the question is, how much do you put into the Indian basket? How much investment do you put in there? But clearly having maybe not a free trade agreement, but a trade agreement between Europe and India where tariffs drop dramatically, you will see trade grow just as dramatically.
That's why trade wars are complicated, right?
That's why you don't want to start one.
Yeah, exactly.
So a couple of things I picked up on this week that I thought was interesting. GM especially talked about all the subscription services that it's selling and taking in billions in revenue. They call it deferred revenue because you can't count it until it's actually paid, but they got billions on the books. Ford came out this week talking all about how many more miles people are using Blue Cruise for driving and how it's expanded the availability across its lineup and how more people are signing up for it.
Suddenly it's in the F-150 and their hours of use have just exploded.
Yeah. So I thought that was something, that we who watch the industry need to keep tabs on. We've been talking about the revenue and profits that could come from these revenue services or subscription services. Now it looks like it's starting to happen. And, I think Ford has talked about on its software services that it does as part of Ford Pro fleet management, profit margins of like 70%. I mean, way beyond anything that they can get in the rest of the industry.
That fleet guy you were talking about before, that's who's paying that.
That's right.
That.
That's exactly right.
Uh-huh. But I don't know that Dave is going to be paying that.
No, but I mean, I to your point, I think, the more the software comes in and this AI-driven kinds of software that they're putting into that's coming into cabins and infotainment systems and stuff, people are going to want some of these features, I think, and I think they will be willing to pay small subscription amounts for select things that they can now do in their car. So I think it is coming.
Yeah, but it's got to be really compelling.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to pay a monthly fee to turn on my seat heater, but I will pay to drive hands-free.
Right, exactly. And there's more of that type of stuff coming that's being envisioned that I can see, particularly younger people who've been used to, certain how they function with their phones and stuff, and you start to do it in your car and you start to have this capability. I think you may start to pay for some of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing I wonder about, you mentioned the younger people that have grown up with their phones. I mean, their phones are central to their existence, right? I mean, it's just not something that they happen to have. This is something that, they communicate with their friends and just find out about the world and so on. And so to what extent are they going to say, oh yeah, I want this replicated in a car and I will spend more money for it?
Yeah, I think the trick, and most people are talking this way, is not to replicate it. It's to find something that's unique about being in an automotive environment. And I don't know what that is, but there some of the things that that you're seeing, you saw around CES, just in terms of infotainment and agentic AI type stuff that they're doing, I think is getting us closer to where you could parcel out some features that you might not be interested in one, but maybe you're interested in it, and so there's starting to be this smorgasbord, I think, of things that are possible.
Yeah, my advice to the industry is if you can do it on your phone, don't even try to do it in the car.
Right, which is why the hands-free, eye-free driving makes so much sense, because you can't do that with a phone, right? I mean, but I mean, in terms of buying anything, whether it's gasoline or something from Chick-fil-A, I mean, you can do it on your phone right now,
right?
Somehow.
Well, I saw one demo, for instance. It was you're on a route in your navigation system, and you decide you want Mexican food in an hour by at a place that has a charging station where I can recharge my car. You start to get the kind of these multiple inputs. If your navigation service can do things like that, that might be something that you would say, I'd like
hey,
to
Google.
Upgrade. Yeah, but I mean, this is more seamless and more, it can adjust your route. It can, tell you what's the impact it's going to be on your battery and all that type of stuff. So I think it's getting far more sophisticated on what they can do.
Yeah, as long as it's something if it's a situation where having it integrated with the car is better, then the automakers have a chance at charging a subscription service. Otherwise, forget about it.
Yeah, it has to be around the functioning of the automobile, I think, or that you're in this automobile.
Right.
All right. You just turned someone's phone off by saying, "Hey, Google." They wrote the comments.
Sean's saying that when Gary said, "Hey, Google," somebody in the audience had their phone turn on. That's pretty good.
Shows how effective these things
We're getting to the end here, but one thing that I thought I'd point out, we also reported this in Autoline Daily, Gran Turismo, which is like one of the most popular games in the world, is now incorporating 2 Chinese cars in that you can drive. The Xiaomi SU7 Ultra, the Yangwang U9 Extreme. And the reason I mention this is, any automaker that can catch the next demographic wave and ride it can ride it for an entire generation. But you got to crack the code on making that generation really want your product. And so with Chinese cars going into Gran Turismo, now Gen Z and Gen A being those who are 15, 16, up to 15 or 16 years old, are going to grow up as Chinese cars are just, and Chinese brands are just part of the normal everyday experience, at least in gaming, at least with Gran Turismo. And I think that is a cultural, I don't know what I want to call it, a turning point.
But doesn't most of the world live with Chinese cars right now?
Yeah, they are available in so many countries, but so many people have never seen them yet. I mean, are there Chinese cars in Brazil? Yeah. Are there a lot of Brazilians who have never ever seen a Chinese car? Yeah.
But they're in England, they're in France, they're in Germany.
Right.
I mean, they're in Europe, right?
I think
they're in China.
I think the Chinese, sort of have an inferiority complex in terms of their cars aren't necessarily considered on the same plane.
I think that was true until a few years
ago.
I mean,
I think it's not, I think they're competitive. I'm not saying they're not competitive, but I think in their mind, being in a platform like that where they're on a par with these other supercars really is a feather in their cap.
Right. Mm-hmm. Good way to put it.
All right, we got to end with something positive, so I'll give you guys a quiz. Okay.
Yeah.
January 29th, 1886, a patent was applied for that basically revolutionized everything we've been talking about today.
1886?
1886.
So I would say that was probably
you're going to get it.
Gottlieb Daimler's patent for the automobile.
You were close. You were so close.
Okay, then it was
Carl Benz.
Carl Benz.
Yeah, that was
Carl Benz. Yeah, Carl Benz, not Daimler.
So the Benz patent Motorwagen, the world's first practical automobile.
Yeah.
He applied for a German patent, and it was, we're celebrating the anniversary today of that. And I thought it was interesting, that it was a 3-wheeler, okay, and the engine was, of course, in the back because you have the wheel in the front, so you've got nothing to put it against. And just wonder, maybe that was the right design. Maybe he had
rear
something.
engine, 3-wheel.
Maybe the 3-wheel.
Nah, the 3-wheel thing, I can tell you, those things understeer like
Still waiting
crazy.
for that Aptera drive, John.
Yeah, that's right. I had an interview with the co-CEO just a couple of days ago. That video is about to get posted. Very interesting. We can talk about that next time too.
Yeah.
But let's wrap it up. Dave Zoya, thanks so much
for
coming on the show. Good having you here. Gary, good having you. I want to, before we sign off, I also want to give a great shout out to our Patreon and YouTube members, because you guys really help us keep shows like this going along. But with that, we'll see you next week.
AutoLine After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.